Now we're going to go in and start updating some transit lines. So you might be adding some new transit lines or changing courses or maybe adding or removing stops. So what we're going to do in today's scenario is we're going to go through and add in a new transit line to our model. So we built out that new bridge, and so we're going to just keep running with that and say that, let's say that we want to, in addition to private transportation being able to utilize it, we want to add in some local buses. Now here is the existing transit network in and around the area that we're going to be observing. We have quite a few stops, and even if we zoom in farther, there are some stops that are closer together, so they've been kind of visually combined, but we do have stops existing in the network. Before we get into building, I just want to talk about just the structure of the stops, because there are a few different levels to the stop that can kind of trip people up. So the first thing I want to talk about are the stop objects themselves. And what a stop represents is a transit facility. And a transit facility can be a number of different types of transit facilities. So for example, you might have a single stop on the side of the road. You might have something like a park and ride or a full-on transit center where you have multiple different public transit lines all coming together. Within each stop, there may be one or more stop areas that represent modal zones within that PT stop. So for example, if we take a transit center, that transit center might be a park and ride that is also a hub for something like a light rail platform and a bus depot, right? So you might have a parking structure with a light rail stop and a few bus stops nearby as well. So all of those modes within the transit center need stop locations, and so we have the park and ride portion, the LRT platform portion, and the bus stop. And so the transit stops allow us to have points in the network in which people can shift from one mode to another. And then within each modal zone, there is stop area, there is an object called a stop point, which represents a boarding location. So each link in Visum has two directions to it. And so you can either place a stop point on the center of the link, meaning that it can be serviced by both directions, or maybe you have a stop point on one side or the other that can only be serviced by one direction or the other. So the stop points can be placed either on the center of a link or on the sides of those as well. For our use, what we're going to do is we're going to be loading up a transit edit graphic parameter file, which will just highlight again the points of interest that we want to look at. We have some points of interest laying out the new line route that we want to be putting in. And in this case, we're going to be adding in a new line route within this section. So it's going to loop around the ballast point area, and then it's going to go across our new build into the east side of Tampa and do a loop there and then kind of go back. So how this is going to look is we are going to select the lines object. And then we're going to create a new line in the network. Now, the line is not the physical route through the network. It's just the overlying informational layer above that defines, what fare system does it have, who's operating that line, and then a line can have line routes within it. So we're going to start by adding a transit line to the network. And this is how we do it. We click the insert mode option, select the lines layer, and then click on the screen. And then we can configure the line information. For our purposes, what we want to configure is the name of the line. In this case, Heart 099. We're going to select a local bus transportation system and then an operator as well. Now, there is also a public transit project transport system. So if you wanted to differentiate between trips made on a a new build, we do have a transport system in the network for that, but I'm just going to select local bus. And then the fare system as well. So within an operator, there might be multiple fare systems. In this case, we're going to do a local bus fare system. Once we have that line defined, then we can create the route through the network. In this case, the line route defines the course that it goes to the network. And so we just use the insert mode, and with the editor, we select line route. And then we select the line that we want to have, because maybe you have a line that's inbound and then a line that's outbound, for example. Ours is going to be looping in a circle. So we only really need one route that'll have multiple headways. But maybe you have a line that goes uptown and then one that comes downtown. So in that case, you're going to have two different line routes on the same line. So in this case, you can define the line route name, and then we're going to edit the parameters of that line in such a way that wherever we place it, it will allow us to also place it on links that may be closed to that local bus transport system. And then we're just going to draw the line route around. So before I get too far into it, I want to jump over into our new project file. I'm going to open up our 2015 init. Now, if you've used it in the past, it should show up in your quick references down below. You could also say open. Yeah, I'll save my land use. And then come down here, we have our 2015 init. Hit open. Now, in this case, we didn't actually build out the link in the 2015 init, so you might use the completed version of the one we just built. So I'm actually going to open up, I've created a transit update base file that has that link. It's just a copy of the previous one that we built. And I think when I was building it the other day, I copied over the loaded version of the model run. So it's currently loading in all the paths from that loaded 2015 model. Okay. So here we want to open up our graphic parameters file so that we can see kind of what we want to be operating on. So I'm going to go to graphics, and we have a transit enter graphic parameters file that I can load in. And so this file should just be what we just built, right? It should have a line edit, although it looks like this one's in a slightly different spot, but that's okay. It looks like the one I built earlier this morning was coming down here as opposed to up here. So it looks like I did a little bit of differences between the two. But here we have our point of interest line edits in place. We can go ahead and take a look at that. So in our points of interest, we have the new build point of interest, which was the bridge. And then we have actually a new training new line. So in this case, it has different graphic parameters and things like that. So we have our link structure. It should still have the same interchange structure and all of that. So it should be fairly similar to what we did this morning. I'm gonna shrink down my procedure sequence just so it's a little bit easier to see. So in this case, what we want to do is want to make sure that we have the lines object selected. If I activate the lines in the network, you can see here are all the different lines that we have in the network. I'm going to select the lines layer, and I'm actually going to turn off graphically the lines so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. I'm going to say insert mode. So when I select insert mode, when it comes to lines, we can either create a new line or we can create a line route on an existing line. In this case, we first want to start by creating a new line that we're going to go through. And then once we select that create new line, you can just click anywhere on the screen. and you should get this editor that pops up. Heart 099. For transport systems, we're going to say local bus. We also have a project submode that you could also use for new projects. Standard operator, it's going to be Hillsborough Area Transit. Fare systems, it's going to be a local bus. So again, we're going to select the lines, click the insert mode, make sure we're creating a new line, and then you're going to define the information that you want around that line. Then we'll click OK. And now we want to actually put in the line route onto our system. So I'm going to select the option for line route. And then just like I did before, I will click somewhere on the screen, doesn't really matter where. And this will give us our line route editor window here. So now I can use this drop down and find the line that I just created. So in this case, we did Heart 099. We could name the line route however we want, or we could leave it blank. In this case, we're not going to have two different operations, right? So we're not going to have a northbound and a southbound line route. It's just going to be one that kind of loops around kind of in a more or less counterclockwise fashion. So I'm just going to call this like something like primary for now. And direction up is fine. So in this case, we've defined the single line route. Again, if this was a straight line, we'd have one direction going up, and that would be the direction up. And then we can have the inbound direction coming back down. And then you can say an inbound versus an outbound line route. So now once you click OK out of that screen, we can start to edit the actual parameters of the line route. Or the actual physical geometry of the line route. But before I do that, I want to click on this parameters button because I want to make sure that I can also assign the line route to links and turns that are closed. So here I'm going to say also, use also for closed links. And that will allow me to assign the line when I start the line route, when I start building it, to existing stop points and in nodes and things like that. So I'm going to turn on the stops just so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So here we have stops that are already in the network, and we want to assign a line route through the network. So you should have this edit course window open just kind of on the side. So I like to put it somewhere where it's not really in the way. And then I'm going to pick whichever stop is going to be the first stop in the line. So, you know, if there was a transit center or something, I'm just going to pick this one just because it's right here. Left click and start dragging. So I left click on that stop and I start dragging up, and you see we have this purple leading edge followed by a red trailing edge showing where we've been, right? And so what Visum is doing is it's identifying the shortest path between that start point and where I am currently hovering. And so I'm just kind of tracing out the line route that I want to use. Now it's important that you stay on the correct side of the link because the links do have directionality. So you want the arrows to be facing in the right direction. If you are facing on the other side, what can happen is maybe it will do a U-turn and try to come back to that spot. So I want to make sure I'm keeping my cursor on the correct side of the link. Now, if I go too far, it will identify a different path, and so it'll try to find the shortest path. But what we can do is we can go as far as we can before it starts updating. So I'm just going to go there to make it easy. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to wherever the turns are, and then you let go of left click. So you'll left click and drag from here to here. And then on your editor here, there's an option that says fix all profile points. And so if you click that, it will kind of lock down those existing profile points. and then you can just repeat the process for the next leg. So I find the stop that I finished on before, left click and start dragging. I can drag to this corner, fix all profile points. Now I can do this southbound leg. I go all the way down to here, fix all profile points. And now we want to go across that bridge. So I'm going to hover over this, left click and start dragging over the bridge. Fix all profile points. Now I can come over using my scroll wheel. I pan over, press and hold the scroll wheel to pan over. I'm going to zoom in on this interchange because if I go like this, the shortest distance is going to try to take that on-ramp. You see how it's trying to take this on-ramp and come up. I want to make sure that I'm taking the appropriate off-ramp. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to say fix all points. And then I'm just going to continue on my way. Fix all points. Find where the end is. I'm going to just move this out of the way a little bit. And just keep defining this line route as I go. Here's an option where you see if I'm hovering on the right side, I have the arrows going to the left, and then if I'm hovering on the opposite direction, it's trying to come back. So I want to make sure that I'm always moving in the direction of travel of the line route. Go there, fixed point. Gonna go up. Make sure I'm in the correct direction of travel. Now we're starting to loop back, but we're still covering new ground by our line route. But pretty soon what's going to start happening is we're going to eventually meet back up with existing points on our line route. So you're going to have to be careful about that. So for example, if I get to this point, so far nothing has changed. I've only ever covered new ground up to this point. So I've only found new nodes and new stop points that I can go through. However, if I start to try to go back this direction, we already have a line route point right here that's going eastbound. So when I click on it and try and drag, I'm going to get this prompt that says, which direction do I want to edit? And in this case, if I select number 1, that's talking about the first pass of this node. So the first pass in this case is this eastbound movement coming from Highway 41 to the east. But I want to edit the second pass. So in this case, we've looped around and we're coming back and we're crossing this node a second time. So I'm going to click 2 and I'm going to click OK. And that will let me re-edit that point. So that way I don't accidentally, if I just selected number 1, what would happen is it would re-edit it would undo all the stuff I just did, and it would basically make the bus do a U-turn at that location. So same thing here, I'm going to left click at this node and start dragging, and I want to do the second pass. Click OK, and start coming down the road to this ramp terminal here, fix all points, left click and drag at this point, second pass, click OK. Come across the bridge. I'm just going to click on the bridge, fix points. So now I can come over to this side, left click and drag, second pass, get to this intersection, click there, fix all points, second pass, and then come up to this point and fix all points. So up to this point, we have drawn the line route so that it loops counterclockwise around this square, goes across our new bridge, loops around these points in a counterclockwise fashion, and then doubles back across the bridge and then comes back up to the north. You could have probably done that faster by covering larger distances. I wanted to be zoomed in so everyone could see everything that's going on. So I was just going short distances at a time, but you could definitely cover a lot more ground more quickly if you stay zoomed out. For example, I didn't need to stop at the bridge, but what I wanted to do was double check that I'm using the appropriate course through the network. I didn't want this to snap down onto the wrong side of the off ramp. Because again, even though we closed those ramps, so we closed that opposite direction from using this ramp, we told the line route that we can use closed links. Because maybe there were links that were not allowed to use, that local buses weren't allowed to use previously, but now that we're adding a new line route, we want them to be able to use it. So we check that box. So you got to be careful if you have this box checked because it might assign it to links that you don't want it to assign. So it's better to just kind of work systematically through and make sure you're placing it on the right location. Now, when you've got all of your line route points defined, one more time, just click Fix All Profile Points, and that should lock everything down for you. And then once you're done, you can click OK, and you'll probably get this prompt. And the reason we get this prompt is, again, because we've assigned the line route to links and turns that may not allow local buses to utilize them in the base model. But since this is a new model, we are assigning a new bus route to it, and so we want to obviously open up those links and turns to the local bus. And so this prompt is just saying, hey, there's a bunch of these links and turns that must be opened for transport system local bus. So do you want to do this? And if you click no, then those links will remain closed to local bus. But what we want to do is we want to click yes for all. There might be multiple prompts that come up if you just click yes. It might go through it turn by turn, so you can kind of decide at a turn by turn level. But here, I'm just going to click yes for all because I was nice and careful about how I placed the route. And so now we should have a line route that is going through the system. And if I click the edit mode and turn on my lines, we now see we have this blue local bus line going across our new bridge that wasn't there before. Okay. If you wanted to add stops, it's pretty straightforward. You click stops option, and then you click the insert mode, and then you can just go ahead and start dropping stops, and they should layer in one stop area and one stop point with all the stop locations. Sorry, I did that in reverse. You want to put down a stop point and then it'll layer down the stop. So if you're going to enter a stop onto the network, so maybe we want to add a new stop somewhere over here, you'll select the stop points option, click the insert mode, and then you can see how I can assign the stop point to a specific direction by hovering on one side of the link or on the other side of a link. Or if I hover on the middle, I can put the stop point in the middle. If I put the stop point in the middle, that means it can be serviced by both directions because again, the line route is going eastbound and then doubling back and looping back westbound. So if I want them to be able to stop at both sides of the street, I'd put it in the middle. Or I can put it on one side or the other. For example, maybe you have a stop point farther down on the eastbound side and then farther up on the westbound side. It just depends on how you want to do it. You can also put stop points at nodes or intersections. And so that allows you to do that too. So here you can just add a stop point, for example, just left click, and that should add a stop point to your line route. And since we added a stop point, again, if you remember, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint real quick to the stop configurations, just real quick. Let me go all the way back. The difference between stop points and stop areas and stops. Sorry, I gotta find the right slide here pretty quick. Here, I'm just gonna do this. So if you remember, it's kind of a tiered approach, right? The stop is the overarching total stop location. It encompasses all of the transit facility objects. The stop area is mode specific. So park and ride, LRT platform, bus depot. And then the stop point is the specific platform within that mode area. So if we place the stop point, in order for the stop point to exist, it needs an area and a stop object. So we could build this out manually by putting in a stop first and then defining stop areas and then defining stop points. Or if we add a stop point, it will automatically define all of the layers all at once. And that's why it's in this order from, again, top down if you're looking for a procedure workflow to kind of follow, top down, right? So stop points, you can add those in. Now, typically what you want to do is you'll want to add in the new stop points before adding in the lines, because that should, when you add in the lines over the stop point, it will automatically assign the line to that stop location. Okay. So now, sorry, I gotta find where we were again. So we added in our line route, we fixed all parameters. I'm gonna say from current slide, there we go. You want to make sure that you turn on all links and turns for the transportation system that is assigned to that line route. And now the next step after we created the line, we've created the line route through the network, in this case, a counterclockwising loop. Now we want to add in our headways. So what is the frequency at which the bus is going to be operating? And this is done on the background side at the line level. So we're going to go to PUT supply. We're going to go to lines. And then in this model, we're going to go to line routes. So there's a list specifically for line routes. And in that list, we have headways. We have peak headways and off-peak headways, so headway 1 and headway 2. And these are defined in minutes. So we can go ahead and set our loop to 15-minute headways. And that should then back calculate into the line itself, and create a time profile for us. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in the network. So we're going to go into, now that we've defined our line route through the network, we're going to go into lists, and then in the lists, PUT supply, lines, and line routes. And this should open up the line routes list, and it'll show all of the line routes that we have in the network. However, we're only interested in the line route for the new line that we just built. So there's the line name attribute right here. We could filter this list by that. So I can look for, in this case, Heart 099. And that way I don't have to scroll through the whole list. I just search for it by clicking the filter button and look for our line, which is 099. Here we can see that it has that line route name primary, the direction code, how many stops is it serving? In this case, it's a local bus serving 52 stops. What is the length of the route? It's 38 miles for the whole loop. It looks like the link runtime, it will take an hour to complete the entire link runtime. And then if I keep scrolling over, we see headway 1 and headway 2. So in this case, our headway 1 is going to be 15 minutes, and our headway 2 is also going to be 15 minutes. Again, attributes that are in white are enterable or editable. they're not necessarily always input attributes, but you do have the ability to edit them. If they are grayed out like this means they are calculated in some way. Typically what that will mean is that they're an output or some combination of other inputs. So again, in our line route listing here, we can go ahead and find the route that we want to edit, and we can see information about that line route. Now again, if this was a more linear line route, it would have two directions to it. So let's go ahead and see if there's an example of that somewhere. I didn't have one off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can find some. So for example, here we have Heart 037, right? It's going from here up northbound to Net Park, and it has the same information, but instead of going from Brandon to Net Park, it's going from Net Park to Brandon. So you see how the direction code is reversed. They serve the same number of stops, they have the same distance and similar run times, but they're just opposite directions. So we have a line that's going straight down from Net Park to Brandon, and then we have the opposite direction. So you can always have within the same line, they're both considered line 37, but they have different line routes. And that's why we have that two-layered approach. For ours, all we did was we had one line and one line route because it's a loop. So that's the reason for that extra layer of information. Now, the way this model is set up is to automatically calculate a time profile off of that. So if I go into the list menu and go to PUT supply, and then if we go to lines, there is a list for time profiles. So if I select time profiles, and then again, we have the line and name. So I'm going to search for Heart 099. We have our Heart 99 primary line route name. And here in the time profile, if we scroll over, we see headway 1 is set to 900 seconds or 15 minutes, and headway 2 is set also to 15 minutes. And that just automatically picks up from the line route user-defined attribute. And then in the assignment, it will utilize these user-defined attributes from the time profile to create those headways specifically. Okay. So now that we've created our stops, we've created our lines, we've created our line routes, and we've added our headways, the last step that we could do is just jump into the procedure sequence. So I'm going to look at the procedure sequence over here, and you'll want to run through the assignment, and in particular the transit assignment. But also, since we've created a new link and a new line on that link, there might be some mode shifts as well. In terms of the mode choice. So you probably want to run most of the, if not all the procedures, so that way you get the right mode distribution throughout the network as well. So in addition to running your AM assignment, you'll probably also want to run the whole procedure. So that way the assignment interval acts correctly. Okay. So that is really all there is to it with the public transit lines. As far as that goes, in the other trainings that we've given for like the D1 model and things like that, we covered creating more linear line routes. So if you want to take a look at that, creating the reverse directions and stuff, you can go look there. But in the line routes list, if you wanted to create a reverse direction, you could always right click, and then there's a create opposite direction option. So if you do have a single directional line route that you want to create, you don't have to draw both line routes. You create one, go through, configure it, configure its headways, and then generate the opposite direction. It'll copy all that information down, just going in the opposite direction. So it should be a pretty straightforward walkthrough there. Okay. So now that we have our transit edit up and running, the last thing I want to do is just do a quick network comparison, just like we've done before, right? And so again, I'm going to save this, file, save as, make sure we have transit update complete, hit save. Again, ideally, you would want to do the network comparison after running the simulation, running through the procedure sequence. And then that way you could also compare how the flows have shifted and stuff like that. But since it'll take a while to run through the whole procedure, I'm just going to save it and we're just going to look at the physical changes. Again, it's saving all that PRT demand. Okay, so now file, compare and transfer networks. Again, looking at this base version, I'm going to click OK, just see what's different. I'm going to put my model transfer on this side over here. Oop, I wanted to stack it. There we go. Again, we've also added some links and some turns. So there's some new links and turns. But in addition to adding the links and turns, we've also updated a bunch of them. So we've changed the transit TSYS sets. So here, since this model run also has a new assignment, a lot of the links have been updated because the assignment updates the link flows. So you can see how the volumes have all changed as well. But if we just look at the TSYS set here, we can see that many of these objects went from just being HOV, SOV, truck, and walk to now allowing the local bus. So we can see all of the links and turns that were previously closed to local buses that are no longer closed to local buses. Because we added this new line route and we clicked that allow closed links. The same thing goes for the turns. Again, there's probably going to be a lot of turns that have been modified because of their the assignment process. So you see a lot of the volumes have been changed. But if we go to TSYS set, there's a lot of turns that now were HOV, SOV, and truck that now allow the local bus. So we've opened up some of those turns automatically to the local bus just by doing it. And then finally, we can also look at the number of lines. So we can see what line was inserted. In this case, Heart 099. We can see what line routes were inserted. We had the primary circulation line route, and then I added a new stop as well at this location. So we inserted a new stop 880 or 8800. And then also some new time profiles and things like that.